Kalispera, good afternoon. It's my pleasure as president of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils and CEO of the U.S. Council on Competitiveness to welcome you to the 6th Delphi Economic Forum's Leadership Conversation on the State of Competitiveness, brought to you by the GFCC and Compete Greece. I will shortly introduce our distinguished panel of global leaders who will share their perspectives and insights on the profound challenges and opportunities facing their nations, regions, and the world through the lens of competitiveness policy. As we strive together to shape a new post-COVID era, embracing the 3 strategic pillars of innovation, sustainability, and resiliency. These pillars are essential as we integrate them to deliver inclusive growth, prosperity, and in the eternal words of Aristotle, eudaimonia. Let me first recognize and thank our host and partner, the Delphi Economic Forum, and its visionary dynamic founder, President Simos Tsomokos, who has created and built this forum into a major global platform for the highest level dialogue and engagement of leaders from governments, the private sector, and civil society. Symeon, we are very honored you can join us today, and thank you for your manifold contributions, including being one of the earliest members of the GFCC. By way of background, the GFCC, celebrating its 10th anniversary this December, is a global network hailing from some 35 countries, members representing competitiveness councils, industry, university, and government agencies. Together, we're all committed to formulating competitiveness strategy and action agendas for our own respective nations and regions, but most importantly, to set a global movement for competitiveness that will be embraced in the world. We share best practices and promulgate each year the powerful GFCC global principles that drive competitiveness. These principles constitute a very strategic framework to catalyze action and change. We are very honored that since the inception of the GFCC, our chairman has been Mr. Chad Holliday, the chairman of Royal Dutch Shell, former chairman of Bank of America, chairman and CEO of DuPont, president of the council, chairman of the Council on Competitiveness, and really a tremendous leader. We are also very proud that Compete Greece is the first ever private sector-led competitiveness council in Greece, is also a GFCC member, joined by our sustaining industrial members, Piraeus Bank and Ethics Group. In record time, Compete Greece has launched its Compass initiative, articulating the policies and reforms essential to boosting the competitiveness of the Greek economy as it rapidly recovers from its economic crisis, negative growth, and unsustainable unemployment. Let me recognize its founder, Dr. Simos Anastasopoulos, for his leadership and vision and strong commitment to founding Compete Greece and in record time developing this Compass strategy. During the post-year as set forth in the GFCC's Crossing the Chasm and Building the Future Economy, we have learned lessons of profound import to shape the next chapter in competitiveness journeys as we recover and resume our economic activity from the devastating COVID pandemic. There are 7 key things we have learned. 1, we can innovate far faster than ever thought possible. 2, we can transform manufacturing, organizations, and supply chains and work processes faster than ever contemplated to meet existential threats and emerge stronger and more resilient. 3, we learned that telework works, it delivers high productivity, and that employees and leaders like a hybrid work environment. We have learned that our IT infrastructure did meet our needs, but it is still not inclusive, and it leaves many, many people around the globe without the digital tools and access to learn and work and thrive. And we learned that cybersecurity is more important than ever. We learned our supply chains are very fragile, and efficiency and cost at all focus is not enough. It has to also be security and resiliency to deliver the supplies and capabilities we need in our nations, regions, and around the world. We learned new and latent innovators and entrepreneurs can indeed burst forth into the innovation ecosystem, creating new purpose-driven products and services. And finally, most importantly, we had learned that competitiveness policy must integrate the trifecta of innovation, capacity, sustainability through all dimensions of life and business, and resiliency. Now let me turn to our brilliant panelists, and I will each ask them in turn for some initial comments. I'm going to start with you, Chad, to provide a global view on some of the large-scale competitiveness challenges and opportunities you see from your perspective as a business leader. I have to say that when Chad was the CEO and chairman of DuPont, he was one of the first business leaders in the world that understood the imperative of sustainability and also how it links directly to resiliency and innovation. Chad, we welcome your framing remarks.
It's been a learning experience for all of us. So I'd like to highlight that and how I think it applies and relates to the 10 principles that we have in the GFCC. It's amazing how quickly we have all adapted. And if I look at the fundamentals that seem to be driving us, it's a slogan: think local, resource global. Think local, resource global. Obviously, we've had to resource materials and supplies globally. We could not make them all locally. Obviously, we resourced the vaccine globally, but it's the organizations that could think local and find out what did they need to bring their people together to do the right masking, to do the right vaccination process, to operate their hospitals in a different way is what's critically important. I was studying one hospital where the emergency departments were greatly taxed. They found a way in 2 weeks to increase the capacity of an emergency department by 50%, reduce the wait time to pre-COVID levels, and be more effective in caring for patients. It was this agility that made sense. As we've looked at organizations that have shown that agility, many of them were practicing what's called agile project management to start with, ways of moving projects much faster than we ever thought before. So those companies that already had that in their vocabulary, how to do agile project management, seem to adapt much better than those that did not have those kind of techniques already in their DNA. At Shell, we have allowed locally the individual filling station to adapt as they needed for the environment. Some started selling vegetables and fruit because that was the only way people could get them. Obviously, early on, many of them sold toilet paper, the only way you could get that too. So what we found was really critical was to think local and give people the freedom to do that, but resource global. What I am concerned about through this process, if we stop trusting other countries and other organizations and think we must do everything locally ourselves, we're going to take a step backward in productivity. So we have to find ways to build that trust and interconnectivity to make it a success. Looking forward to the rest of the panel. I'll stop my comments here.
Thank you, Chad, and we'll come back to that in our discussion. Let me ask Symeon Tsomokos to give us a perspective on the broader European region. Symeon, you have really, through your work, formerly leading the Hellenic American Chamber and many other activities, and now with the Delphi Economic Forum, I think you have probably one of the deepest understanding and perspectives of what's going on in Europe, bringing together heads of state, government leaders, and really crafting this incredible agenda around inclusive economic growth. So we'd love to hear your perspective on the European environment.
Deborah, thank you very much. And we are proud and privileged that the Delphi Forum is a member of the GFCC. I must admit, since the first day of this economic forum that we have built in Delphi, your participation, your contribution has added great value, and we thank you deeply for this. You have a big share of this success, I must admit. Europe, Europe faces a number of challenges these days. There is a stagnant economy. It's the immigration issue, which is very critical and very important. There is an aging population, which is, unfortunately is increasing. Of course, Europeans' GDP is almost 1/5 or perhaps a little more of the GDP of the world, but we have a feeling that these last years there is a diminishing role of Europe in the world affairs, and primarily in business. Let me say a few words about the competitiveness, the state of competitiveness in Europe. It has been lagging in competitiveness, at least vis-à-vis the United States, since the beginning of the 90s, just as the digital revolution was taking place. And this was followed by the emergence of China in global markets, which further exacerbated this deficit. I think one of the reasons why Europe was hit so hard by the economic crisis of the last decade was the low comparative productivity, misallocation of investments, alongside many structural weaknesses left European companies, unfortunately, unable to be competitive in international markets. This is certainly true for European countries, but I fear it is true for our country, Greece, that Simos is going to address immediately after. Our view is that European firms trail behind in their capacity to innovate and absorb new technologies and know-how. According to a recent study by the European Investment Bank, more than 30% fewer patents are filed per European citizen than per American citizen in the United States. So what are the challenges Europe's economy is facing? I would say briefly three major ones. First, the European manufacturing industries have lost a considerable weight in global manufacturing value chains, not only because of the general shift of the global economy's center of mass towards Asia and other fast-growing regions, but also due to the relocation of entire industries, for example, the textiles, to other world regions. A second major challenge, I think, is that the European industry is facing simultaneously the digital transformation and the transition towards a net zero emission and circular economy. And thirdly, the sluggish growth of labor productivity currently observed in many European industries. The challenge that Europe, I think, faces today is not only one of driving change in the global marketplace, but in many areas, investment in specific sectors that are crucial for competitiveness, whether in research and development, in key areas of technologies, or in education, or in the renewal and expansion of Europe's infrastructure, has fallen far behind, I think. So, a few words about the competitiveness in Europe after the pandemic. It resulted in making, the pandemic unfortunately resulted in making state aid popular again. Of course, that was inevitable. There was a clear and urgent need to keep the economy afloat, boost demand and help specific sectors of the economy which were hit particularly unevenly by the pandemic, such as tourism, manufacturing, entertainment, and small and medium-sized companies. Our view is that we should be using state aid to boost the competitiveness of European companies in the international market. Of course, and one main issue is that the stimulus package of the European Union is not as big as it is in the United States. So we fear that perhaps maybe it will not be enough in order to sustain the European economy. I will stop here and perhaps we can discuss later the responses to the challenges.
Thank you, Symeon. And it's very important that you raise the issue around productivity, because really that is the core metric for sustaining competitiveness growth, is these ever-increasing opportunities to build productivity into the fabric of industrial and service operations. And we'll come back to some of these questions. Simos, I'd really like you to address the situation in Greece. I mean, you're a leader, CEO of a pharmaceutical, a healthcare company, and so you obviously have a very important perspective on the pandemic. But very importantly, you've galvanized private sector leaders for the first time to come together and really develop a sustainable competitiveness policy for Greece. So we'd love to hear about the Compass Initiative.
Thank you, Deborah. It is great to see you even from such a distance. Very hopefully next year we're going to be together in Delphi again, the natural place for this very important forum. CompetGR, the Council of Competitiveness of Greece, is very proud to be a member of GFCC, and we would like to thank you for this opportunity. It is great also to participate in this panel with yourself, Chad and Symeon, the mind and soul behind this great success. Greece is facing the same challenges, of course, as the rest of Europe, and Symeon managed to explain quite well what the situation is in Europe. COVID, of course, and the long duration of the pandemic specifically, has disrupted business activities and has shifted the focus of all governments to contain the virus and safeguard livelihood. And of course, support healthcare systems to deal with COVID. It is understandable under these conditions that reform activity has slowed down. The emphasis today for our government also is placed in sustaining the economy to the point of exhausting all fiscal means and preparing the environment for the day after, for the growth that we are all looking forward to. As the crisis revealed that pre-existing structural weaknesses, both economic and socio-political, it is important not only to plan for recovery, but take measures to build a better economy. And this is particularly true for economies like ours in Greece that continue to lag in competitiveness terms. To that respect, major organizations realized the shift in priorities, have paused for this year their measurements and publications of competitiveness figures and rankings. The WEF, for example, whose Global Competitiveness Report is the major tool to assess the state of productivity for the most important economies, has published this year a special edition focusing on the priorities to recovery and revival while addressing the issues of productivity, people, and the planet, the 3 Ps. The report addresses the readiness of 37 countries, fortunately Greece is included in this report, to transform their economies, recover quickly, and be able to provide sustainable growth. And these are the keys: growth quickly and sustainable growth. We, at the Council of Competitiveness of Greece, have followed a similar path for this year edition of Compass. Compass, of course, is our tool to assess the competitiveness level of the country, monitor trends and improvements in our economy, and prioritize the necessary actions to improve our productivity and the business environment. In short, and in aggregating the priorities that emerge from our analysis, this year, the Compass provides a call to action that we summarize in 3 initiatives that will support our position to gain in competitiveness and recover quicker. What are these 3 initiatives? First, focus on regional competitiveness rather than national. Second is align skills with jobs, especially the jobs that will be needed for the markets of tomorrow. Upskilling and reskilling are the 2 most important factors that we are going to need in order to recover quickly. And last, not least, to promote the business dimension of innovation. We need to shift the focus and the priorities of policy making from only tourism to increase tourism and increase the potential of manufacturing in Greece. And we need to produce competitive products that are going to be needed in the markets of tomorrow. And I will also stop here, make a pause, and wait for your question or elaborate on any of those that I talked before.
Thank you, Simos. Well, I do want us to have some discussion about regional competitiveness. We've talked about, the global view of the GFCC and, of course, the region of Europe and the European Union and other parts of Europe who are not yet in that region, and then Greece. And in the United States, I share that perspective of the great regional challenges we have as well. So looking at competitiveness regionally is very much a strategic, forward-thinking mindset. And so how we advance that is going to be really a challenge and a huge opportunity. Chad, how do you really see the world emerging from the pandemic in terms of the positive side of potentially unleashing a new era of innovation and productivity growth and really beginning to solve some of these problems that emerge that we've kind of hidden under the carpet for a long time?
Well, Deborah, I think it's just exactly the right question, what we need to be focusing on now. What we have seen, as I said in my opening remarks, is this agility to move much faster than we ever have before. And those organizations that can do it have really risen from this. What we found at Shell, because the pandemic hit us first in China, and we still had to have our retail stations out there supplying the customers. And we took the models that were developed there and we moved it to the next country that was hit, country after country after country, came all the way around to China again. What we found is there were a lot of learnings from every one of these moves. And if we were quick enough to learn from it, it could be very helpful. So what we've seen, our learning curve was so much faster during the pandemic than it had ever been before. So we're looking to say, how can we bottle that? How can we continue to use it for our other problems? Now, the other massive problem that the world is facing is global warming and the climate change that comes from that global warming. The only way we're going to solve that effectively and reduce greenhouse gases fast enough to avoid the worst impacts of climate change is work together, learn from each other. And we believe that what we've learned from the pandemic can be applied to climate change and other issues. A critical thing about this regional competitiveness that you started with is trust among countries, though. If we cannot learn to trust each other, so we have mutual dependence on each other, we will not be able to reach the goals that we need to have. Let me stop there.
Thank you. You know, you mentioned, of course, the imperative to deal with climate change and sustainability writ large. Do you think this is really now so much part of competitiveness that we really need to almost think of defining competitiveness beyond the productivity, but to include the sustainability imperative as almost part of the fabric of even thinking of competitiveness policy?
Deborah, I do, and I do for one reason. It's the young people that have many decades ahead of them and are thinking about what they want to do with their lives, what they want to do with their careers. They care about a sustainable world. And I find that's the one common theme around the world, whether it's in Sierra Leone or it's in New York City. You know, people still care about those fundamental issues like they never have before. They understand what we're doing to this planet. We're just using too many resources. So I think that's why it will be impossible to have the discussion without thinking about the long-term impacts. The idea of short-term gain with destroying the planet in the process just will not be acceptable going forward. The quicker every country and company accepts that, the better off they'll be.
Thank you. You know, Symeon, when you outlined some of the key structural challenges in Europe in terms of productivity and the manufacturing, et cetera, as well as issues around the loss of strategic industries, with the huge investments now that the EU is putting together in their next innovation framework plan, billions and billions of dollars, coupled to the resources of the European Reconstruction Bank and development banks, it's almost as if the EU really has the tools of a sovereign wealth fund. And, you know, if you were in the mix of that, what do you think would be some of the pan-European investments that they could
I must admit,
really
yes,
double down on to change the trajectory of growth and prosperity in Europe?
I must admit we are optimistic. The stimulus package, I think, is more than 750 billion euros. And I think through this, we are going to see growth in the economy. The European Union gives absolute priority to clean energy, because now we don't speak about energy change. We speak about climate energy, actually, and climate, urgency of the matter. We have had a very good message the other day from Secretary Kerry saying that, all countries, all governments, all people need to work together for a better environment, for clean energy. So I have a feeling that through this huge stimulus package that they have announced, both in the area of energy and the environment, as well as the digitalization, I have a feeling that Europe is going to recover quite soon. And of course, there is a lot of optimism that this is going to happen in Greece as well. And mind you, as you know, Greece is paying a lot of attention to these issues, with the decarbonization in certain areas of Greece, etc. So we are optimistic on this front.
Thank you. You know, Simos, Greece, of course, has been a leader for many, many years in understanding the sustainability in food production, diet, health, all of this to create a healthy life. And now, of course, you have one of the largest development projects, perhaps in the country, but one of the biggest in Europe, the Hellenikon development. And I understand that sustainability and really developing a whole new platform for entrepreneurship and innovation is going to be part of that. Do you feel optimistic that across and within Greece, cities and regions are really understanding the potential to build sustainability clusters, almost as it were, and to transform both existing industries and new industries?
I feel optimistic because I think that we have started the discussion. But if you allow me a couple of words on regional competitiveness before, because this is a very important issue and very important for Greece also, and a great part, I must add, of the work that the Council is doing right now. Europe, the European Commission, has realized that the existing policies on national competitiveness level have not brought the results expected, and are really focusing today, since last year, on regional competitiveness. And there, Greece is a true laggard, because our regions are almost at the lowest end, all of them, of the European regions. There is a lot of work to be done there, and that is the reason that among the 3 initiatives that we proposed this year is to enhance, to focus on regional competitiveness. We need to take advantage of the specific strategic advantages or competitiveness advantages of each region and use those specifically to target specifically again some of the business that can be brought in the country and the investments that are looking for these advantages. Now, on the sustainability level, you know, the 17 ESG goals of this year are also part of the discussion in Greece. We are also working on them, and we have started the discussion. Sustainability, especially for tourism in Greece, is a very important issue. Only yesterday we had a discussion, a public discussion, for tourism or philoxenia. And the difference between the two is exactly sustainability. How can you use tourism, which is, you know, the locomotive of Greek GDP, to mobilize other parts of the economy and create a sustainable growth for all industries, primarily tourism, but that will drive all the other industries, agriculture, agrotechnology, culture, and everything that is associated with tourism.
Simos, I wanted to just add another dimension to the discussion for Greece, and then Symeon and Chad, please jump in on this. And this is about the whole imperative for nurturing and growing the startup entrepreneurial culture, and not just startups, but startups to scale ups to create the new businesses, the new jobs, and also the new capabilities. And under the leadership of Piraeus Bank and really Ethics Group and you, of course, there's this very exciting initiative, Roots, that the GFCC has participated in, and the first cohort of really amazing innovators at the forefront, you know, working in the most advanced areas of information technology linked to precision agriculture, etc. That's just, to me, a tremendous potential for Greece. And I know when we had the presentation, many of our partners from around the world were texting me, why can't we have Roots in our country? So I think you're creating a new model there.
I think it was a great initiative. We had the discussion with the Athens Stock Exchange when I was the president of the American Hellenic Chamber of Commerce, and I'm very happy to see that it has developed to such level today. It's a new system that can support startups, but not only startups, companies that are established and they have some new idea that they want to make a product out of it. So it's not an accelerator, it's a whole system for capacity building that can bring all these new companies, all the companies with new ideas, to the level to be ready to be invested in. And this was the great idea behind it. We teach them how to make a business plan, how to export their products, and how to attract investors.
Deborah, this is a great initiative.
I know we're going to be concluding fairly soon, so I want everyone to be thinking of kind of your last comments. But I want to address the issue of infrastructure again in the broadest sense, not just physical infrastructure, but the infrastructure of the workforce skills, the infrastructure of research and development, but also the infrastructure of human well-being. And I very purposely use the brilliance of Aristotelian ethics around this concept of eudaimonia, which is about flourishing, that the ultimate condition of human beings is to flourish. And that is something also that's come into the forefront during the pandemic. We focused on the body, but we didn't really focus on the mind and the soul. And we're seeing huge, huge impact for that. So this is not a traditional topic for competitiveness and state of competitiveness, but perhaps we need to think of what can we do as leaders, as business leaders, as government leaders, as organizations, to look at Aristotelian flourishing and thriving also as an outcome and a driver of competitiveness, because that's really our ultimate goal. So Chad, you talked about trust. Trust is just a core fabric of human existence. So I'm going to put you on the spot to comment a little bit about trust and flourishing and what we could do to accelerate that as we drive economic growth.
Well, Deborah, I think your word flourish really makes a lot of sense here. And I believe we've been talking about it in many different ways for a couple of months. For those people who've been working from their home using digital technology, we've been talking about, do they need to come back into a physical workplace? And what does it mean to be face-to-face with people and not be face-to-face people in a physical sense as opposed to just electronic sense? These are important questions because there could be great productivity improvement if we can use this digital technology the right way. But if we keep human beings from flourishing, I think it's a great term to use in this concept, we will not be able to accomplish what we really need. So I think it's really critical that we find a way to build the mind and the soul and the body as we focus this and really flourish. And I believe those companies and those countries that find ways to do that will be very critical. And Deborah, as you'll recall from our very early work in the council, regionally combining universities with governments, with companies working together to find ways to flourish is way it really works. Thank you.
I think we have 1 second for Symeon and Simos to just thank you very, very profoundly for your tremendous leadership. And again, Back to the Future, going back to ancient Greek culture, civilization, eudaimonia, flourishing is going to be also at the heart of competitiveness going forward. Thank you all tremendously and look forward to being with everyone in Delphi in 2022.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah.